dark page in the annals of America has been written to the crack of an assassin's bullet. A nation mourns, the world grieves.
November 22nd, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was shot to death in full view of hundreds of spectators watching him in a Dallas, Texas motorcade. 48 hours later, the man Dallas police said shot the president, Lee Harvey Oswald, was himself killed by Jack Ruby in full view of millions of Americans watching television. This bizarre sequence of double killings raised great questions. Who actually fired the shots that killed Kennedy? Why did Ruby shoot Oswald? Was there a conspiracy? Were right-wingers involved? Was it a Russian plot, a Cuban plot? The new president, Lyndon Johnson, ordered these questions answered.
This is a sad time for all people.
He appointed a commission of 7 prominent Americans to investigate the whole affair. He literally drafted Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren as chairman. This committee labored 10 months, took testimony from hundreds of witnesses, then brought forth a document close to 1,000 pages. President Johnson received that report on Thursday. He specified that it be made public today.
As the Warren Commission came to a close in one of its final executive sessions, Hale Boggs raised the question of whether they should release the report without releasing at least some of the evidence. He said it might look a little fishy. The response from Allen Dulles, a former director of the CIA who had been fired by John F. Kennedy over the Bay of Pigs, was, go ahead and release it. No one will read it anyway, maybe some professor 30 years from now, but by then it won't matter. Well, some of us did read it.
So too will the rest of diversity. We're in the final analysis of diversity. We're in the final analysis.
What was killed on November 22nd, 1963 was not just the president, or truth was killed, and hope was killed. And a government that responded to popular movements was killed. But if you want a democracy, you have to make it a democracy. And the first step is to take back your history.
The world before the Kennedy assassination was a world in which the war of the democracies against fascism was fought and won, that nuclear annihilation had been postponed, put off, perhaps prevented, that one's government had integrity. With the assassinations of the 60s, with the Vietnam War and the lies of the Vietnam War, and then Watergate, it's as if that sort of fundamental bond between me and my government has been severed. I don't trust them. And that lack of trust all started with the Kennedy assassination. When I first became involved in the Kennedy assassination was when it happened. Life magazine hit the newsstands with its black and white Zapruder frames. At the same time, there was an article in the New York Times quoting Dr. Malcolm Perry as to the incision he made for the tracheostomy through a pre-existing bullet hole, which appeared to be an entry hole. It's embarrassing to say this, but this is what I did. With Life magazine in one hot little hand and the New York Times in the other hot little hand, I walked down to the local FBI office. And I asked to see an agent to bring this to his attention. And what I brought to his attention that Tuesday was, Dr. Malcolm Perry says he got shot in the front of the throat. The Zapruder film shows he's facing away from the depository. He thanked me "Yes, young man, thank you for bringing this to our attention," and undoubtedly stuffed the whole thing in the wastebasket.
At age 10, I got in trouble and sent to the principal's office because I wouldn't hide under this little wooden desk. When they were telling me about an atomic bomb that was going to collapse the roof and blow in the windows, and they wanted me to get down under this desk that has no sides. I mean, I was 10 years old, but I realized not only are they insane because they have this weapon, but then on top of that, they were telling me to do something that wouldn't even protect me. And to me, it was total insanity. And I just said, I'm not getting under that desk. So this is the bat cave. Well, I think maybe other people would rather be doing other things. I wouldn't. I like to read, I like to research, I like to look into things. And, you know, that's been a passion for me, even to the point that on weekends I'd make my parents take me to a public library before taking me out to play sports or something. I grew up in a community that was basically the bedroom community for the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the NRO, the NASA, the whole alphabet soup of initials of the government spy agencies, the Pentagon employees, all were my neighbors. And that's the milieu I grew up in. And listening to them at their cocktail parties and their Christmas parties and when they talked among themselves, it became clear to me fairly early on that there were two governments operating, one that was visible and one that was not. So I started out my research on John F. Kennedy largely because I was shocked by the incident when I was 15 in high school. I remember coming home and someone was hawking papers yelling the president's been killed.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
And I felt a sense of loss, and then also a sense that the movie completely reversed itself after he died, that the sense of hope that he carried for the nation and the things that he was striving for that were more universal and global and peace-oriented were then replaced by this endless war in Vietnam.
The Warren Commission report, this is the one-volume report, and when it came out, all the news media thought it was really wonderful, although it was based upon these other 26 volumes of evidence. However, I keep with the Warren report this volume, not because it's also blue and gold, but because it's the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, and it just seems to be the appropriate place to store this right alongside of the Warren Commission report. I've been practicing law for a quarter of the history of the American judicial system. I tell that to my wife, and she gets very nervous when I say that. On November 22nd, I was trying a case in the courthouse in Manhattan. After lunch, I started walking back to the courthouse, and people were gathered around radios listening. And I said, "What happened?" They said, "The president's been shot." I ran back to the courthouse. I said, "Oh, God, I got a trial." So I ran up to see the judge and told him that and asked that the case be put off. He said, "No, we're not putting anything off. We're trying the case." I said, "The president's been killed." I said, "Nothing we can do about it. Let's get on with it." So I had no choice. I tried the case. We won. But it was the end of the day, probably the least informed person in America. And there was an elderly judge who I liked a lot, and he was walking down the steps, and as I started to pass him, he said, "You think he did it?" And I said, "Who?" He said, "Oswald." I said, "Oswald?" He said, "Where you been?" I said, "Trying the case." I had no choice. He said, "Yeah, they say Oswald did it." And it was in a book depository building behind the president. So I got a question for you. I said, "What's that, Your Honor?" He said, "How did he shoot him from the front, from the back?"
I frequently ask, where was I the day Kennedy was shot? I was standing, you're not going to believe this, like I made it up. I was standing in an autopsy room looking at a guy that had been shot. I do a lot of work as a medical legal consultant. I am consulted by attorneys in civil and criminal cases from all over the United States. I was consulted by the district attorney in the Mary Jo Kopechne case involving Ted Kennedy, the kidnapping of Patty Hearst, Captain Jeffrey McDonald, the Green Beret physician, Sonny von Bülow, Dr. Herman Tarnauer, the prominent cardiologist who wrote the Scarsdale Diet book, the death of Elvis Presley, Tammy Wynette, Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown, Vincent Foster, Branch Davidian deaths, O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey, recently Phil Spector. I was the first non-government appointed, non-government sponsored forensic pathologist given access to the JFK autopsy materials at the National Archives. As we sit and talk here today, the president's brain is still not accounted for. Now, why would the brain be missing? Why? I'll tell you why. There's only one reason, and that is because examination of the brain would reveal that the president was struck in the head from the right front side, which I think was the grassy knoll behind a picket fence. And what would a court of law say in the Jones murder case? A good, decent, strong judge, in my opinion, would throw the case out. That's what would have been done. And isn't it amazing how the Warren Commission report, a world of sycophancy, just adroitly and with great agility intellectually ignore that.
Where we are now is the grassy knoll. This is where the fatal shot was fired from. And that's where 80% of the witnesses said at least one shot came from. And in fact, that is where they came from. I've been coming down to Dealey Plaza, Dallas, since 1975. I moved down here because everybody who was in this city who was doing good work on the case either died or retired from the case. There was nobody left. I've been in Dealey Plaza ever since, trying to let people know what the truth is, answer their questions, let them know that there is, in fact, an alternative to the official fiction.
I have been doing research into the assassination of John F. Kennedy since late on the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, and I'm still at it. I was 20 feet from where I'm sitting at the moment John Kennedy was killed. If they interrupted the football game this afternoon to say, Kennedy assassination solved, details at 11, and they had 3 guys up in front of cameras saying, I did it, and I did it, and here's how we did it. Before the calendar page starts for the next year, to be 10 books on the shelf saying they're wrong. And in that sense, we have met the enemy and they are us.
Who's your favorite president?
John F. Kennedy.
Who's your favorite president?
John F. Kennedy. She tries to figure out who killed John F. Kennedy and why.
And why. That is right. That's very good, both of you.
When I was very young, I lived in Hammond, Louisiana, which is very close to New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And so politics was a part of your everyday conversation. We watched television the entire weekend. We never turned it off, I don't think, as much, unless it was just off the air. And so I saw Jack Ruby shoot Lee Oswald, which was very traumatizing. And I can remember sitting there and I kept saying, is that real? Is that real, Grandma? Is that real? And my grandmother crying, and she was one of the smart ones. And she said, well, now there'll never be a trial.
The first JFK book that I read was Mark Lane's book on Lee Oswald. And probably the next book that I read that really impacted me and wanted me to join the community was Best Evidence by David Lifton. And I think a lot of us are what we call Best Evidence babies, got started through reading his book.
When I graduated from film school, my partner at that time wanted to go ahead and have me write a screenplay. Maybe we should do one on the Kennedy assassination. Be a terrific subject. So I said, The only way you can tell this story is through this Garrison guy down in New Orleans. I got as far as about writing a treatment, and then I picked up Variety magazine one morning, and I saw it, Oliver Stone had bought the rights to Garrison's book. So there went my idea. Okay, there it went. So I just basically transferred all my research into a book.
If I'm honest with you, I'll just have to say I was asleep. My roommate came running in and he said, "Wake up." He said, "They shot Kennedy." And being a Texas conservative at that time, I just said, "Well, good." And the President of the United States was assassinated. Once I began to delve into the Kennedy assassination, I just found out there was this wealth of information out there, mostly gathered by private researchers that had never reached a mass audience. People did not know that information. So I simply collated it all together into a book and said, here. I'm just an old reporter. I've never claimed to have done all that work myself. It's the work of dozens and dozens, hundreds of researchers.
The first time I ever got on the internet, I put in JFK assassination just to see what would come up. And sure enough, there was a news group of people sitting around discussing the Kennedy assassination. And so I leapt in with both feet, knowing pretty much nothing. You know, I'd read maybe one book somewhere in the past that I didn't remember, and I had an opinion. Everybody dumped on me. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no facts to back up what you're saying. And I was mortified. You know, I started going to the library. I was reading all I could. I found a local library here in Los Angeles that had the full set of the Warren Commission volumes. And I'll never forget, because I pulled the volume, I believe it was volume 6, off the shelf, and I opened it, and I just, went right to, it happened to be Malcolm Perry being questioned by Arlen Specter. Specter came up with a way of phrasing that was completely hypothetical. If a bullet, not the bullet, but if a bullet came very slowly through, and is it possible that perhaps that, a small puncture wound could be an exit wound? And Perry was kind of like, well, under the exact circumstances you just specified, yeah. I was kind of motivated by anger, anger, that we had been told this big lie, and anger that the press had obviously never read this section, because if they had, I was just convinced everybody would see it the way I did. It was so blatant.
It's very well known to many of you, former vice chair from 2002 to 2006. He's also a clinical professor of ophthalmology at UCSF and assistant clinical professor of ophthalmology at Stanford University. Board certified with the American Board of Ophthalmology and a member of the American Society of Ophthalmic, Plastic, and Reconstructive Surgery. So please welcome Dr. Gary Aguilar.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction.
The guys that were critics of the government's position, i.e. Warren critics, seem to always have a more persuasive argument, at least in my mind, but I was busy pursuing an education, of course, and a medical degree, and then training afterward, and didn't pay it much mind. I then did spend quite a bit of time reading about it and found it endlessly fascinating. And fascinating because it was sort of consistent with so many of the things that had caused me to change my view of the world from having grown up in a right-wing Republican conservative family to one who now saw the world rather differently in the aftermath of Vietnam.
I was lucky enough to fall into this case in the late 1990s when a huge amount of new and some of it shocking information came out. And I was naive enough, I suppose, to wonder why this wasn't in the New York Times. There were a lot of people reading this stuff and talking about it, but nobody seemed to have the skills to make it available to a wider audience. So a box like this set of FBI files is about 3,000 pages, and that will take a few hours to scan. Then the titling and indexing information, there ends up being another hour or two of handwork in it. So it may take, basically a good part of a day to do a box like this. And so we are roughly putting on the order of 15,000 pages a week up on, five of these boxes roughly, or maybe sometimes a little more up online. So there's a steady stream of new material. I don't have time to read it all, I must say. We rely upon everybody out there to go through it.
These books
in through here deal with right-wing politics. This deals with the FBI. There are books on the McCarthy era and blacklisting. Again, more books on the American right wing. Books in through here are on World War II. Over here, books on organized crime, the CIA, some of the smaller agencies, a lot of the fiction that's been written on the case, some of the older, some of the harder to find titles on the case. Probably 10 to 15,000 volumes. The assassinations, a lot of them are American politics, a lot of things on espionage, but it's this whole world of clandestine America. The numbers of things I have go up, go down at any given time. In the first 10 years, we have the reaction to the Warren Commission and the 26 volumes.
There was a kind of interest growing in the Kennedy assassination and the possibility that the Warren Commission had gotten it wrong.
In the JFK assassination, the research community, of course, has grown and grown. Early on, there was simply a little handful of people, voices in the wilderness.
It was individuals and not the mainstream media who began catching the government in so many lies.
Over time, these people who otherwise would never have known each other, they wound up having a really huge impact on shaping public opinion.
First of all, they were pretty brave people, because a couple of them got firebombed, and when that happens, you know you're doing the right stuff.
In 1963, Mark Lane had recently completed a term as a state assemblyman in New York. He was a practicing attorney in New York City.
Mr. Mark Lane has been around for many years, identifying himself gladly with causes worthy, controversial, and unworthy. Mr. Lane is a skillful lawyer and has written a best-selling book called Rush to Judgment. The publishers maintain that this book has, quotes, changed history, that single-handedly Mr. Lane has discredited the Warren Report.
Of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that, and I do request someone to come forward to give me a legal assistance.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what? Sir?
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, we can't hear you.
He quickly concluded that there was just no way that Oswald could get a fair trial. He wrote what he called a defense brief for Lee Harvey Oswald. It was published in a national socialist newspaper called the National Guardian. The New York Times actually wrote an article that summarized Lane's article. And people like Shirley Martin in Oklahoma and Ray Marcus in LA, they contacted Lane's office, and that had the effect of making some of these early critics aware of each other, aware that others were as skeptical as they were.
I found these articles in obscure publications like Liberation Magazine or The Minority of One. And they were written by a Philadelphia lawyer by the name of Vincent Salandria.
The heart of American intelligence first married the single assassin concept.
And Vince Salandria was a high school social studies teacher and also an ACLU lawyer at the time of the assassination.
The points that Vincent Salandria made then are correct even now.
Sylvia Meyer came along and produced a tremendous book called Accessories After the Fact.
Sylvia Meyer, wonderful Sylvia Meyer.
Sylvia Meyer was meticulous and just showed that the physical evidence that Oswald was where they put him, or that the gun could have done the job, or that it was belonged to Oswald, or that the bullets were right. She just, every single discrepancy, she tore it apart.
That book is where I would send anybody to start.
Mary Farrell was a legal secretary who lived in Dallas, who got the news of Kennedy's assassination and immediately sent her boys out rounding up all the local papers, because she started to discover that the immediate news reports had information in them that just so seemed funny to her, and some of the accounts changed a little bit over the first couple days of reporting. A lot of the most serious people researching the case found her an invaluable resource. She had an incredible memory. She would remember phone numbers of obscure witnesses just at the, like that off the top of her head. And being based in Dallas, I think, also helped her be a focal point. So when a lot of people that were writing books or doing other research would come to the scene in Dallas, stopping off with Mary was a highlight of their work along the way.
Harold Weisberg, I think, had been a Senate investigator and had investigative skills, but felt that the Warren Commission, when it was released and he looked at it, was a really botched job, that they'd done a really flawed investigation. He's not an easy read. You sort of have to get in your canoe and slog for a while.
But it was the first critical analysis of the Commission's own evidence, and one of the earliest demonstrations of the flaws in the Commission's material.
If the crime was beyond the capability of any one man, then on that basis alone there was a conspiracy.
May, she was little known except among the researchers themselves, but she probably worked harder than any of them. By the time I got to her collection when she was dying, she had about 6,000 books. She had 43 filing cabinets, 4-drawer filing cabinets, that were filled with her clippings. She told me she didn't like computers. I said, that's because you are the computer. She started, her weekly radio show was called World Watchers, and she started it based on Weight Watchers. And she thought that there would be little cliques of housewives who would clip the papers and talk about things and coffee clatch, and then send her materials of what they were seeing in their city.
John Kennedy once said, "One man can make a difference, and every man should try." Whether he realized it or not was speaking of Penn Jones.
We are at the office of Penn Jones, Jr. in Midlothian, Texas, 25 miles from the Dallas courthouse. For the past 2 years, he alone in the Dallas area has conducted an independent investigation into the assassination of President Kennedy.
Penn Jones was the owner and editor and publisher of the Midlothian Mirror, which still exists to this day, by the way. It was a weekly newspaper in Midlothian, Texas, which is a small town probably 25, 30 miles from Dallas. And he gathered a series of weekly editorials into a book called Forgive My Grief.
He was somebody that was out on the front line, like blowing the bugle, long before most people were there.
There's no need to have the public asking a bunch of silly questions about a bullet going in the wrong direction. In my opinion...
To those in the research community who knew him, he was very generous. He would always share information in his time, and he was a lovable cusp.
I think that's all I can say. Thank you very much.
Smart enough to figure out that they were killing the witnesses and pegged those deaths. He had tracked about 175 witness deaths that he thought were suspicious over the years. And he would say, well, maybe it's just a happenstance. But there were just too many happenstances.
I think that what these people did was nothing short of heroic. I really believe that. And I think it's really unfortunate that today most people don't even know who they were.
They are independent research. They're grassroots research. They're not from an official investigation. They're looking at an official investigation and finding out what's wrong with it. And to me, that's the business of citizens in a democracy, is to get at the political realities and to dig up the evidence, because you can't have democracy without information.
Slowly over time, to see the emergence of rush to judgment, inquest, to see these books come out that were reviewed and that people could not find that much wrong with them, right? They tried.
The whole history of this case is one of peaks and valleys, times when there is an incredible interest, and then other times when it almost seems to fade away.
In the history of the Kennedy case, there have been three major
milestones, peaks, if you will, in public interest. The first was the Jim Garrison investigation into Clay Shaw. And that really got the case going.
Jim Garrison burst into America's consciousness in 1967 with a startling claim. He could prove there was a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy.
Jim Garrison, New Orleans District Attorney, the man leading a sensational investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Mr. Garrison. Of course, the press really came down on him. I mean, really, they never investigated it. They never considered that he might be right. They just immediately attacked him.
I have no comments.
You believe that he did not conspire to kill the president?
I do.
Would you ever
Although I may admit there could have been a conspiracy, but I do not believe that Mr. Shaw was involved in a conspiracy.
They made his life a living hell and destroyed the investigation.
After Shaw's acquittal, the case went into a kind of nadir.
The second peak was when I released the film of the assassination on national television.
Wide World Special.
So I was asked to appear on Goodnight America, the Geraldo Rivera show. Back in those days, Geraldo still had an open mind and was willing to deal honestly with the issues of the Kennedy assassination. We presented the film to the national public.
For 2 years, he, like most Americans, believed in the official version, the Warren Commission version of what happened, but the day he first saw that 8mm Zapruder film, that amateur film that was made, that was the day he stopped believing. Robert, welcome, and I wish you could set up the Zapruder film a bit for us, and we'll get right into it.
Okay. Abraham Zapruder was a Dallas dress manufacturer, and it was pure accident that he brought the camera with him that day. He almost didn't. And he was looking for a good vantage point, and he picked a point on Elm Street in Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. As the motorcade passed in front of him, he got what is frame for frame the most valuable historical document of all time.
I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy. And Bob and Dick, would you please narrate what we're seeing as we show this film?
This is commercial footage leading into Dealey Plaza. This is the car on Main Street.
So this film was taken by actual newsmen. This was spliced together with the Abraham Zapruder film?
Yes.
All right, so this is the beginning of the motorcade.
Okay, what you're seeing now is in slow motion so that you can grasp what is happening. This is a film taken by Marie Muchmore that leads into the Zapruder film. It's for time continuity. The president is waving to the crowd here.
And Jacqueline Kennedy, of course, is sitting alongside him in the open car.
Right. This is from Orville Nix's film. This is originally 8mm footage. And they're heading now toward Elm Street. They're on Houston Street now. They're going to make a left-hand turn. It's on the corner where they're going to make the turn there that the book depository was. Now this is the Zapruder film.
Okay, so the cars are coming along now into Dealey Plaza?
Yes, these are the lead motorcycles of the motorcade.
All right, now with the president and Mrs. Kennedy is also Governor Connolly.
Right. Now, before he goes behind the sign, the president is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the sign, he is shot, then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit?
He's already been hit.
And now?
And at the bottom of the screen, the headshot.
That's the shot that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movies.
Now, the Warren Commission said that all of the shots were fired from behind by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin, firing at the president. And as you can see, clearly, the head is thrown violently backwards, completely consistent with the shot from the front, right.
That's the most upsetting thing I've ever seen. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Then the public, for the first time, saw that, in fact, the president had been hit from the front and was thrown to the rear.
They were shocked. They wanted to know, why weren't we allowed to see this before? Why was this withheld from public view?
People were demanding that a second investigation be opened up.
And that, of course, created a real powerful blast to create the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which probably the first phase of the House Select Committee under Richard Sprague was as close as a Kennedy assassination ever got to a real actual murder investigation.
And however imperfect it was, it did focus renewed attention.
That House committee, our United States Congress, comprised of Democrats and Republicans, came to the official conclusion that the Warren Commission was wrong and that there was a conspiracy involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. That was the official finding.
With a probability of 95% or better, there was indeed a shot fired from the grassy knoll.
Good evening. A congressional committee has concluded that President John Kennedy and civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., both of them, were probably killed as the result of conspiracies. The House Assassinations Committee wound up its 2-year study by recommending that the Justice Department look into both cases.
The news item of the century, cracking open, and no further discussion, no specials, no hour-long expose, just now for the sports. Warren Commission files were locked up by LBJ for 75 years, and the House Select Committee in the 70s locked their files up under congressional order for 50 years.
Government records of testimony, FBI reports, Dallas police reports, things that should have been open for the American people to make their own decisions about these things were locked away.
So once again, there was kind of a hiatus.
There was a conference at MIT at Cambridge here in DC, and the 10th anniversary that I always refer to as the Spook Conference, because I never saw so many intelligence people in my life. In one room, even guys with eye patches and dragon lady girlfriends. And there was a Midwest conference out in Chicago of researchers.
It kind of flattened out until Oliver Stone's movie based upon Jim Garrison's book.
This laid the evidence out in a dramatic way for the public to see.
This was a military-style ambush from start to finish. This was a coup d'etat with Lyndon Johnson waiting in the wing.
And that created a hurricane, likes of which I've never seen before.
This is ABC News Nightline.
Rarely do directors walk into dangerous political territory, but Oliver Stone has done just that, to assault the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
I don't regard it as art. It's propaganda.
He's taken a left-wing paranoid thesis and supported it with fabricated evidence.
JFK is one continuous lie.
Misrepresents the truth the same way that Joseph Goebbels misrepresented the truth as he cranked up the propaganda machine for Nazi Germany.
It was a package of unfathomable lies packaged together, though, with a cinema artist's great skill.
I have been accused by a number of people, some of them journalists, of a distortion of history. And if there is any common thread of attack running through claims of those critics of JFK, it is the notion that somehow there is an accepted, settled, respected, carefully thought out and researched body of history about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, all of which I have set out deliberately to subvert, using as my weapon the motion picture medium, and taking as my target the impressionable young, who will believe anything as long as it is visual.
They made his life a living hell.
The film is ultimately a hypothesis.
We have just about 5 seconds. That is our report for tonight. I'm Forrest Sawyer in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
The public has always known it was a conspiracy. They knew it, but they didn't know why. The big thing with JFK is they didn't have to sit down for a couple of weeks and read a book. They could watch a movie in 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and see what the issues really were and understand what the evidence was that proved that there was a conspiracy.
At the end of Oliver Stone's award-winning film JFK, at the suggestion of researcher Robert Groden, he included a final comment saying that the files regarding the Kennedy assassination were still locked away. There was a groundswell of response, and Congress got thousands, if not millions, of letters saying that these files should be released.
Mr. Garrison.
But when this came, there was a momentum. The act was passed in 1992. the Freedom of Information Act from 64 to 94 maybe got a few thousands of pages. Since the passage of the JFK Records Act in 92, the archives and the different agencies have been forced to release over 6.5 million pages. It's one of the largest record releases in history of the United States, and it's a model that we need to be using for the Martin Luther King assassination, for the 911 Commission records. The spin put on at the time, even by the Review Board itself, was, well, we released all these files, but there's nothing there.
And CIA Director Robert Gates announced today that he plans to make public secret files on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Weekend Update has already obtained one of the files. This document seems to confirm the Warren Commission's finding that Oswald did act alone.
I started coming in here fairly regularly 2 or 3 years ago. It was a place I could come and sit that was well lit and had a table and enough space for me to work. Staff got to know me, and so I'm sort of the only sober patron of the bar, but we're in the dilemma that we're in large part because of what happened in November of 1963. And the reason that we, who were alive and adult at that time, remember exactly where we were is we know what it cost us. In Dallas, Penn Jones had started a moment of silence there in 64, I guess it was, even right away, on the grassy knoll on every November 22nd, and he asked me to continue that tradition there on the knoll, and I have.
No, I don't want to use the mic. I want to talk to you. You can come up here and hear me. I have a human voice. I'd like to speak with a human voice at this moment. I was asked by researcher Penn Jones to carry on a tradition of a moment of silence here on the grassy knoll. What happened here November 22nd, 1963 was not a lone gunman in a window. It was a military coup d'etat and the rise of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about in his final speech. So take a moment of silence and think about that. I still try to think, and I still have hope, and I still believe in people, and I still want to get at the truth, and I hope you do too.
There used to be a symposium, and it was the Assassination Symposium on Kennedy, ASK.
That was a rock group promotion thing called South by Southwest, and for whatever sets of reasons, the people in Dallas, rather than organizing their own conference, brought these people in and had them organize it.
We just, we thought at the end of the day, well, all these people are coming in, they're paying their money at the door, and it's going to rock and roll. We could use this money as like a research fund. Ideally, if you're going to talk about John Kennedy in the fall, all there is in Washington is the archives and the gravesite. That's not the same. You've got to stand where Zapruder stood. You got to do it in Dallas.
So I wanted to say welcome and thank you for coming to this Coalition on Political Assassinations regional meeting in Dallas. We do this meeting every year. We have since '94. We keep pushing at these conferences to get each year the best new evidence and new research, forensic and ballistic medical evidence, and the authors that are doing the good work. And we've got a great lineup this year.
Myself and our research team, it has been our attempt to document...
I'm just trying to work with the people that I consider honest and independent and legitimate and well-informed and scientific and academic researchers.
The issues we have will pop up.
We used to do peer review and look at abstracts of what people were going to present and decide who could speak and who couldn't. But there were some that we just felt the stuff was speculative and not sort of rising up to the level of looking like research, not just whatever crazy or salacious theory somebody has.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to just say a word about the Camelot revisionism that is happening now. That there is a power struggle within the Democratic leadership for control of the party. Killing Camelot also helps to rid the Kennedys of whatever power they have left inside the Democratic Party. I think that's all I have to say. Is that okay?
Welcome. I'm happy to see you all here. I know that you're sincere. I know you're dedicated. Deborah, would you like to wave with you? This is Deborah Conway, just to put an answer.
In 1995, another organization put on a conference in Washington, D.C., a big conference with big names.
With Dean Acheson, former Secretary of State under Truman and one of the wise men of the era.
These people did not make newcomers feel welcome. There was a club, the door was shut, the door was locked, and you didn't get in. Maybe you don't understand that it's not all about the speaker, that it's about the audience too, and your audience are the ones who are going to buy these books and buy these tapes. I think it was probably even the next year or the one after that Mary surprised me. She said, I'm giving the rights to her chronology of Lee Oswald and her database to JFK Lancer because I trust them and because I know that they will give it to anybody. If it's some PhD or if it's a high school student writing a report, that was a shock that went out through the community, that she backed us totally. I took everything I knew about my organization skills and my people skills to put on the Lancer November in Dallas conference.
I actually had a dream that I was able to go to the Oval Office early 1963 and to visit with him. And gee, what do you ask the president?
In a long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation.
We'll have our moment of silence at 12:30, where I'd like for you to turn and face the road, and we'll imagine the day when President Kennedy was assassinated here in Dealey Plaza.
Oh, say, can you see?
What I do with JFK Lancer is I give a face to the research community with our website and our events, and I give them voice. I give them the conference and the website, and I publish their books and their research, and it
gets their voices out to the world.
And the home of the brave.
When this event started years ago, it was more or less an experiment. We didn't really know whether it would be a success. And I think those of you who have been to these seminars before know that they're always very enjoyable.
Been to Dallas more times than I can remember. I've been interested in this case from the moment it happened in 1963. From the very start, like a lot of my compatriots in England, we thought there's something wrong. This is not just a lone nut killing this man. There's more to it than that.
President Kennedy was also held in great regard in Britain as well, and I think it wasn't only an American event. I think it affected the whole world.
I firmly believe that there were other things related to the JFK case, his brother and Martin Luther King, because I believe the same people that assassinated JFK did those as well.
We are all working together to try and find if we can get to the bottom of this thing, because we do believe that we weren't told the truth in 1964.
President Anderson, members of the faculty, Board of Trustees.
We do a commemorative event also in June. It marks the day that John F. Kennedy gave his talk saying we have to stop this arms race, we have to stop threatening the existence of the planet.
What kind of peace do I mean? What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana forced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time.
For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish
our children's future, and we're all mortal. He called then for an end to the arms race and the nuclear testing into an arms treaty.
And that, I think, was really the speech that precipitated his assassination.
We must labor on, not towards a strategy of annihilation, but towards a strategy of peace.
The bill before us today, S.J. Res. 282, the title is the Assassination Materials Disclosure Act of 1992.
When the review board convened in 1994, they instructed other federal agencies to hang on to their records because they were going to be demanding them and processing it for declassification.
The Secret Service, the day that they were supposed to turn in their materials to the review board, they destroyed them and said, they're gone. We don't have them. We destroyed them.
That was illegal under the Act. Any record, once the Act was passed, nothing was to be destroyed.
The review board was apoplectic over this, but in the end decided not to make a big public stink in their first year of operation against an agency like the Secret Service. And so they noted it in their final report that this had happened and left it at that. That's for real. One thing you won't find in the documents is the magic secret code that says the government knows who killed Kennedy and here it is in our 40-page report. That's not how things worked. There's huge varieties of interesting clues along the way, some of which just go nowhere, some of which lead you to other things. And then there are the occasional eye-popping moments. One of them was early versions of the Warren Report, which had been written in draft form and presented to commissioners.
It is the view of the commission as expressed in the report that it probably did occur that there was a single bullet conclusion.
So the single bullet is crucial. And it was Arlen Specter who first came to the conclusion that the same bullet hit Kennedy and Connolly. And this is the bullet Specter and the commission say wounded two men. The Warren Commission said that one bullet hit Kennedy at the back of his neck. It passed through his throat and nicked his tie as it came out. It then went on into Governor Connolly's back. Now smashed through Connolly, smashed a rib, and came out below his breast, just below the nipple. And it wasn't finished yet. The bullet then hit his right wrist, tore through part of it, and then lodged in his left thigh. And this is the bullet that was supposed to have done all this.
The single bullet theory says that the bullet came through Kennedy's neck, didn't hit any bone, went right on down, hit Connolly, caused all of his wounds, and that way they can have all of these wounds attributed to one bullet, and then they got the one that missed, and then they got the one that hit Kennedy in the head. So there's your 3 shots, and you've got to have 3 shots to make the single assassin theory work. If there's a 4th shot, then we're into conspiracy and multiple shooters.
Gerald Ford himself, the future president, had written in changes to the descriptions of Kennedy's wound in an early version of the report.
Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. We said that the commission had found no evidence of a conspiracy, foreign or domestic.
He actually changed the text in the report to move the wound in JFK's back to a position at the base of his neck, which is very significant for the simple reason that if you raise the entrance wound to the neck, you of course make the single bullet theory more plausible.
And that one small change of wording is what has allowed them to argue that cockamamie single bullet theory.
These guys were very conscious of the problems they were having, you know, with the trajectory of this magic bullet.
People ask, why do you have Arlen Specter, Gerald Ford, and Emmett Kelly together? Well, they have one thing in common. 3 clowns.
And it showed that the Warren Commission was willing to fudge the wording to make their case seem more plausible.
The House Select Committee on Assassination said, well, we've gone and interviewed the witnesses at the autopsy, and it turns out that the doctors in Dallas were wrong. All the witnesses at the autopsy said that there was no hole in the back of his head and that his wounds looked just like they look in the autopsy photographs. Where are the interviews? We'd like to see them. Well, they didn't come out until the Assassination Records Review Board released them in the early mid-1990s. And guess what? The witnesses at the autopsy described the wounds exactly as the witnesses at Dallas had, that he had a hole in the back of his head. So the House Select Committee on Assassination had falsified his own interviews to be consistent with the autopsy conclusions that they wanted to reach, that Oswald could have done it. They lied. You couldn't even trust the pro-conspiracy House Select Committee on Assassinations to tell you the full truth.
Another set of documents that was found, which is quite an eye-popper, is the so-called Operation Northwoods documents.
Which was a plan by the Joint Chiefs to create a traumatic incident that would terrorize the public and then could be blamed on Castro and could be then used as an excuse to invade Cuba. And this involved
shootings on the streets of Miami and Washington, D.C.,
blowing up a ship in Guantanamo Bay,
blowing up a drone airliner and pretending that it was a real airliner over Cuba in such a way it could be blamed on Castro.
With fake obituaries sent to the local papers.
These would be orchestrated in sequence as part of an effort to blame them on Castro and to be used as a pretext for invading Cuba.
The rush to judgment was really the beginning by J. Edgar Hoover, who that day said Oswald did it and did it alone.
Among those records is a document on the afternoon of November 22nd after the shooting, but well before any full-scale investigation or conviction or anything else happened. J. Edgar Hoover wrote a letter to his investigative staff and called Robert Kennedy and said, we have the man that shot the president and there's nothing else behind it.
This is the president of the United States. A lot of people had reasons to kill him. How can you say the first day there was no conspiracy? You can if you start with the preconception that we're going to say Oswald did it alone and we don't care what the evidence shows.
Another important record that came out was a memo from Assistant and then Acting Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach, to Bill Moyers, who was a press aide to Lyndon Johnson. The memo said that the public needs to be convinced that Oswald acted alone, that the evidence against him would have convicted him in court even if he hadn't been killed, and that there was a lone individual acting on just his own behalf. This was a memo on November 25th, the day of Kennedy's funeral and burial.
These documents didn't just sort of fall one day from the sky. They were dug kicking and screaming out of federal agencies.
We know now from the documents there was basically a COINTELPRO operation against the researchers to discredit them, to try to back up the phony conclusion, lest it go where it would go.
The CIA wrote out a lengthy memo to station chiefs all over the world.
The CIA document is number 1035-960. And 1035-960 talks about how they're going to counter the works of people like myself by using propaganda assets in the media.
They certainly viewed public's disbelief of the Warren Report with concern and provided point-by-point rebuttal points.
We're all communists, we're all in it for the money.
One of the mentions in this document is that they should label these people conspiracy theorists. It's the beginning of the etymology of those two words being joined at the hip, so that now we're in an era where there is no conspiracy that isn't a theory.
It's a very, very powerful and important document. It shows how they did it.
Most Americans still believe in a conspiracy. The idea that a lone assassin could kill the president, a man so widely revered, that idea was simply too much to bear.
They would rather see that, oh yes, there was always a system, there was always some overriding explanation that can let us make sense of the world.
We'll tell you why conspiracy theorists are having a field day.
What sort of person do you think is the average person that believes in a conspiracy theory?
A really paranoid person.
Conspiracies have not gone away because they are too ideologically and, I think, emotionally satisfying to the people who espouse them.
Because I think it's very difficult for them to accept the idea that someone as inconsequential as Oswald could have killed someone as consequential as Kennedy.
I don't know where they come up with this pop psychology nonsense. Well, I'm sorry, I don't fluff my pillow at night and sleep easily with the thought that this was no lone nut. This was a conspiracy of vast proportion that took over the government and killed my president. Boy, I can sleep well now.
You know, after all, I look around the room and what do I see? A bunch of conspiracy nuts. But you know what? For nuts, y'all look kind of normal. You look kind of regular. You look like everybody else that I see every day. Because we're not nuts. Why? Because we don't believe what our government told us?
I think to dismiss everyone as a whole as being kooks or nuts is just an insult. It's just a a slang way of saying I don't want to know enough about this, and I don't care that you know.
You know, there's a certain human nature to the whole thing. I mean, I don't have children. But if I had a teenage daughter and the police came to my house and said, you know, Walt, we found your daughter dead in a dumpster. That'd be the worst thing I ever heard in my life. And I'd eventually be able to pull myself together enough and say, can you tell me what happened? Well, we're not sure. It's either a psycho that got loose from an asylum or a bunch of Hell's Angels, gang raped her and killed her. I'm going to pray that it's the guy from the asylum. But it was just one of those things that can't be avoided. It happened, it's tragic, but it's not the other alternative, so to speak. It's not a systemic thing taking her away from me. It's an accident. Lee Oswald is the accident. Conspiracy is the systemic. And people they'd rather think accident. It's more comfortable, it's more convenient.
Pretty much the library and work area, and also was the COPA office. This section is mostly intelligence, history, This section right here is JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King books that I got while I was with COPA, and others are just personal books. I'm kind of an eclectic reader, but I have a lot of topics and authors that I focus on and collect. They say, like, well, if this is true, why haven't they killed you? And you know, I said, well, it's kind of a rude question. I mean, there's probably no other lecturer that ever gets that question. You know, you just to go to the Azalea Society and they raise their hand at the end of your talk and say, well, why haven't they killed you?
The role of the media in the Kennedy assassination investigation is bizarre and frightening.
It's a mystery why the media hasn't been more active in the case. I think partly it's institutional. The major media in New York, from the New York Times on down, lined up with the Warren Report on day one. And to say after all these years, oh, by the way, we were wrong, would be a pretty big admission.
One is personal. I think some journalists are just defensive. They don't like the idea of people outside their profession knowing more than they do about a topic that they've been tasked to write about.
In my experience, journalists tend to be fairly busy people that, unlike historians, don't spend months and months and months on something.
The evidence was so confusing and recalcitrant that it would take a long, long time. And they didn't have a long, long time.
But it's remarkable to me that preposterous statements were being made by people in the news media. And nobody was asking any questions, not even asking questions. That's the problem. That's what the media is supposed to do.
They bought into the lie in the first place.
The New York Times and all of the major news media, they bought into it before there was a chance for anybody to scrutinize, to criticize, to dissect. They would not do this in the Jones case in New York City or the Smith case in Pittsburgh or so on. But in this case, rush to judgment.
Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old former Marine with a history of connection with left-wing causes.
It's just an indication of how outrageous the times were and how terrified everybody was.
Been given, but I emphatically deny these charges. What you see is an absolute, complete sellout of journalistic ethics.
But it's of the interest for the American media to prove the Warren Commission was right, because if so, then they have not failed in their duty.
Dan Rather was an up-and-coming reporter for CBS here in Dallas at the time of the assassination. On Sunday morning, he was the one who was bidding on the Zapruder film for CBS TV.
You got a chance to see probably the first showing of the Zapruder film, Abram Zapruder's footage that showed the assassination.
As soon as he was out of the bidding, he ran back to CBS, out of breath, just sweating and just... And he gets on national television and tells people he has just seen the film of the assassination.
In the next instant, with this time Mrs. Kennedy apparently looking on, a second shot, the third total shot, hit the president's head. His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Now, no matter where the shot came from, there's absolutely no question the president was not thrown forward. He was thrown violently to the rear. But it's quite clear what was going on. They were trying to make it sound as if the shot came from behind and pushed the president forward. And it didn't happen. And he knew it didn't happen. But he got on TV and lied to the American public.
A second shot, the third total shot, hit the president's head. His head could be seen to move violently forward.
He built his whole career, became the CBS News anchor, all because he was Mr. Reliable and did exactly what Lyndon Johnson and the rest of the government wanted.
CBS News, for a number of years, kept screening investigation after investigation. However, those investigations were comprehensively biased.
The Warren Report was backed by CBS TV on the day of its release. They weren't supposed to have it, but they obviously did, because the day it was released, they were in the middle of a 2-hour special dealing with it, item by item.
Did he own the rifle and pistol used in the double murders? Did he actually try to kill retired General Edwin Walker?
the day it was released. Nobody could read the Warren report and do 2 hours worth of TV special in half an hour, 45 minutes. Yet there it was. It's a matter of history.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
You mean you still feel that there might have been?
Well, I have not completely discounted.
Well, you ask yourself why. Well, who ran CBS? Bill Paley. Who was Bill Paley? Well, he was a founding member of the Central Intelligence Agency, and he was a loyalist. He created their policy, and nobody, even the great Walter Cronkite, would ever dare challenge his edict. And his edict was, we're going to back the Warren Commission, and they did.
The Church Committee of the United States Senate investigated the relationship between the government and the news media.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole News and Public Affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
And it was appalled to see that so many people who were supposed to be reporters were actually on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Well, Carl Bernstein, who's the reporter that, along with Bob Woodward, did the Watergate stories, wrote a Rolling Stone article, and he revealed that up to 400 specific reporters that he knew of were being used as CIA assets in the national press. He quoted one intelligence agent saying that one reporter was worth 20 agents.
When I was a kid, we never would have believed anything like this was possible, and maybe it was happening. But if so, we didn't know it. The Church Committee told us.
Now there's been a series of grossly dishonest documentaries, Unsolved History they're called. There's 3 or 4 of them, and a few others. The special that Peter Jennings did before he died. They are just grossly dishonest. They don't deal with any of the real facts.
Good evening, I'm Peter Jennings. There is no other murder in history that has produced as much speculation as the Kennedy assassination. And it would be impossible in the 2 hours we have to examine the incredible number of conspiracy theories. But unless you are an irredeemable conspiracy theorist, beyond the pale, so to speak, what we will do tonight is demonstrate that those theories are wrong.
President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound in the brain.
They don't deal with any of the real facts. Every one of them has ignored the testimony of the Dallas doctors, which is important, really important stuff.
A gunshot wound in the brain. Dr. Berkeley told me it's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head.
And they just pretend that those statements don't exist. Every Dallas doctor said the president was shot from the right front. Yet the other side just ignores it completely.
Right through the head.
That's what we get as evidence or conclusion about historical reality. I mean, any academic historian would laugh his head off at that kind of nonsense. It's nothing but propaganda and mush. And not only because it doesn't take the other facts into account, but because the stuff they put up as evidence is so flimsy.
Those of us who have worked on this project know that millions of people, all these years later, still have a hard time accepting that it was Oswald alone. William Manchester, who wrote Death of a President, identified this yearning for a better answer. If, he says, to use an odd metaphor,
you put 6 million murdered Jews on one side of the scale and the Nazi regime on the other, you have a rough balance. Greatest crime, greatest criminals. But if you put the murdered president on one side of the scale and that wretched waif Oswald, as Manchester calls him, on the other, it doesn't balance. You want to add some weight to Oswald. It would invest the president's death with meaning. Kennedy would have died for something. Manchester says a conspiracy would do the job nicely.
I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
Often like pillow at night, the main idea that you heard over and over and over tonight is that what all of us are about is people that can't accept the idea that a lone nut could have killed a famous and wonderful president. Well, I'll tell you, I don't know anybody in the research community that ever started their work based on that thought or any thought like it. All of us went to the record, we went to the evidence, we looked at the facts, and that's what led us to the conclusion.
This has been a CBS News Extra.
The press that should be our hero now and is our only hope is still failing us. We deserve a lot more than that.
They just don't understand the severity of what actually happened. The history of the world changed at that moment, right on that spot.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if the press really lived up to the vision of the Fourth Estate?
Ever since the beginning, there has been this idea that you have to attack and, let's say, smear the people who have been trying to find out what really happened.
Some of them are honest and well-meaning, and then you've got some people who have an agenda.
They've become known as the counter-critics. They're people who are paid to put out disinformation.
They've always been there to muddy the waters.
Many of them are authors. They're people that will write books that will attempt to counter the good work that's been done by the real critical community.
The biggest debunking books to come along right after the Stone movie was Case Closed by Gerald Posner.
What do you think of Posner, huh? Good boy.
We've never had in this country, the American public has never had a reason to understand why Oswald ended up on the 6th floor of the depository shooting at Kennedy.
I mean, the great problem is he's a lawyer. As Socrates pointed out in The Apology, they make the weaker case appear the stronger. That's what they're good at. That's what they do. And that's what Posner did.
The release of his books coincided with the release of the files. So the theme was that day, files are open, the case is closed, when in fact exactly the opposite was true.
It's grossly dishonest, horribly dishonest. And I mean, where do you begin when dealing with Posner's book? He has diagrams of Oswald leaving the window, the sniper's nest window, and walking unobstructed straight across diagonally on the 6th floor. What about the thousands, literally thousands of cartons of books that were blocking the way? But he shows the 6th floor being totally empty. And he got away with all this crap. And of course, he was the media darling.
Posner's work got reviewed by Time, Newsweek, huge speaking tours, got all the publicity, okay?
They, of course, gave it glowing reviews, as did every media stooge.
You know, I can remember Katie Couric sitting with Gerald Posner with a cup of coffee in her hand. She said, "Gerald, you just did tons and tons and tons of research. What do you think we didn't do tons of research?" I mean, of course we did.
Looking at the camera and just lying about whatever issue happens to come up. He's their expert on everything.
You have Vincent Bugliosi's new, supposedly definitive work on that.
But it's almost mind-boggling that you could adhere to the Lone Assassin book and write a book of that length.
I mean, Bugliosi's has put together a mammoth book.
I think it's 1,600 pages and then 900 pages of supplementary notes. I find very, very little new that's in that book. It's also very much padded, Because a lot of this stuff doesn't have to do anything with the Kennedy case. There's a lot about JFK's life. There's a history of the mafia.
To say, I believe what they said, isn't it obvious to all of you? Did you really need 1,000+ pages to do that?
The last thing they want to be doing is reading a 1,300-page book by Ms. Bugliosi.
And it really is so intellectually abominable, so emotionally disturbing, that people who should know better, people of intelligence and education, like Posner and Bugliosi, they are educated, intelligent people, that they go out of their way to try to construct and reconstruct and shall I say, rejuvenate and refortify the defenses that were built around the Warren Commission report ab initio from the very beginning.
It's a book for the ages, and the Philadelphia Inquirer said 100 years from now that this is the book that historians are going to look to. So it's the book on the case.
Whenever someone will come out and back them up and say, no, there was no conspiracy, Oswald acted alone, Ray acted alone, then it lets them off the hook. And so they promote those books.
Oh, it's not hard to understand that. That when somebody comes out and says or does or writes something, again, attacking the Warren Commission, why they don't get any play?
Did Max Holland review him? I mean, his bias is so overwhelming and shows so completely.
Max Holland wrote a big piece for The Nation magazine, saying, in essence, the CIA didn't do it. The CIA is innocent, and everybody's lying about the CIA. And he's described in Nation magazine as a writer for Nation magazine. Max Holland is the official writer for the Central Intelligence Agency on the Kennedy assassination. And this is how they do it. Now we have Max Holland writing article after article. It all starts with the Central Intelligence Agency, and they launder it through groups like The Nation.
We're at the W.R. Pogue Legislative Library at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. We're a political materials library and collect anything related to the political process. We have the papers of 12 U.S. congressmen, ancillary collections such as the Kennedy Research Assassination Collection, and we are a center for collecting papers about the Kennedy research. Once we got the Penn Jones papers, Jack White in Fort Worth.
So this is Ben Rogers. He comes every year.
I spoke every year at the COPA and at JFK Lancer about the library and what we're doing with the papers.
It's a valuable collection here of early researchers like Penn Jones and Jack White, and later ones like John Armstrong, R.B. Cutler did extensive work. Mary Farrell's papers are coming here. So, for me, it's a treasure trove. I mean, I could live in this place. And bury myself in it. I did for many years. To see them again brings back memories of the people, because I knew these researchers. They were friends of mine, and talked to them and saw the processes they went through to write the books and what their thinking was.
We're hoping to keep this going and provide an archive for people to research the Kennedy assassination.
I hope that there's enough interest in the public still in the Kennedy assassination that younger people would want to come here and take a look at this and find out about real history from the people on the ground that looked at this and tried to figure it out.
One of the sadnesses of this case is that almost all the books have been written by attorneys.
And historians have been absent without leave on the case. It's certainly true that this is sort of a third rail for historians. I think they know instinctively that it's a black hole, that it's a very controversial event with a huge amount of material. But I think it's also obvious to anyone who's a historian that if you were to research this and then reach the wrong conclusion, you would be pilloried by your peers who have pretty much lined up behind the government's version of the case. So what's in it for an historian to really get into this?
They're basically bourgeois intellectuals who want to keep their academic, and in some cases government positions. To come in and out of government doing this stuff, and that they'll just say well, I'm not one of those. I'm not like those guys over there. You can trust me. I don't believe in conspiracies. We can ill afford to let our history die. The effect of the national security state and all this propaganda is that our real history has been stolen from us, hidden from us. And without knowing our history, we can't act. Martin Schatz, an early critic, wrote that the political paralysis in America is based on the fact that we're allowed to believe anything, but to know nothing. And when you can't know, you cannot act.
The past is prologue, and until we understand what's happened and what we did do right or wrong, or what we didn't do right or wrong, it's very hard to have a barometer to know what we should be doing in the future.
In the larger picture, I think we're still in this funny conundrum where, even though more and more at least has come out in detail showing the fraudulence of the official version of events, it hasn't changed what's in the history books and you name it. And in fact, if anything, as time has gone by more recently, there is enough distance from the event and few enough people remember the facts of the case that it's easier to argue the Warren Report all over again, because people don't know what was wrong with it in the first place.
The world would have been a very, very different place had Kennedy not been assassinated. Many people think, why are you talking about this case now? It's ancient history. Well, it's not. It's still relevant today. Things which are happening today stem from incidents like the Kennedy assassination.
The predominant paradigm in this country is that things happen due to incompetence, not malice, not evil. And that the government is basically benign. It may hurt someone inadvertently, but it would never do something as outrageous as kill its own president. But there's other paradigms out there.
This was a coup d'etat. This was the overthrow of the government. Something that we as Americans can accept, even without question, in Western democracies.
We got people running for office now, and they're talking about assassinations yet again. People should not believe that if you kill the president, that's okay, you can get away with it. It's not like anything serious, like stealing a loaf of bread.
More important is the lessons we can draw for today around how an event like this can have misinvestigations by the federal government take place, and then how the rest of the organs of society can line it behind them.
What good is history if you're lied to? Keep the faith. We owe that to our 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. He was our president, and he was taken from us not in a recall or not in a vote. He was taken from us with a bullet.
Are we ever going to see a prosecution of the Kennedy case? No, of course not.
Will the government ever hold a news conference and some official get up and say, okay, here's what really happened? No.
But will we ever know the whole truth? I can't see any way that we ever will. I truly can't. And that saddens me.
There's too much at stake here. It's going to take another generation or two before everybody is gone from the scene.
I still don't know what happened. I still don't know who did it. I still don't know why they did it. And I don't know if I ever will. And that's a very disturbing thought.
A lot of people like to play the game, even within the research community, that we'll never know. But I think that's silly. I mean, I think that it's an empirical question and we can know.
Sooner or later, the truth comes out. Sometimes people find it, sometimes it just oozes. And whoa, look at that! And there it is.
The attempt to get to the bottom of everything related to the Kennedy assassination, I think, is part of that larger struggle for truth, as it were.
If you really have a democracy, and if the truth is a tough, tough truth, the public can deal with it. Always have.
It may be too late for justice in this case, but it's never too late for the truth. And it's up to people like myself to keep the case alive.
By pulling our energies together and working together, we can make changes. I mean, we've gotten releases of documents that have rewritten the whole history.
White, black, Asian, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, rich, medium, poor, north, south. You know, I don't care. You break it down any way you want to. The American public stands firm. And it's not because of the eloquence or fervor or passion of me and all of my critic researcher colleagues and scholars. We could not have carried the day against those kinds of odds. What carried the day is plain old common sense.
And we all do pray we're wrong. We'd rather be wrong than right. You know, we'd rather not have to live in the world that evidence takes us to, you know, because it's not a happy conclusion. On the other hand, if I had to live in a world where I felt that I couldn't know the truth, that I couldn't know anything, that would be disturbing to me.
But if somebody had knocked on the door in the midst of all of that horror and said, listen, Walt, the day's going to come when you're going to say, it's amazing, but the vast majority of my best friends are people who are my best friends because of that day. And that day holds us together like a family, like glue. We may do as families sometimes do, but at the end of the day, we're still family.
We have all the potential in the world and all the tools that we need to envision what's right. That's the job of every generation. Even if we don't think we'll win, we must try. If I was to write a book now about what our problems are, what the situation we're in, I think I would title it an old Dylan line. There must be some way out of here, said the joker to the thief. There's so much confusion. I can't get no relief. The businessmen, they drink my wine. The plowmen dig my earth. But none of them along the line know what any of it is worth. Well, no need to get excited now, the thief he kindly spoke. There are many of those among us who think that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that, and that is not our fate. So let us not speak falsely now. The hour is getting late.